So today we're going to take a look at a book stack of 5 books to read before you go to college. This was largely inspired by there have been several books I've read somewhat recently where I was like, man, I wish I had this book before I attended college, and I think that they would have helped a lot. So we're going to take a look at 5 books. Off to the side, you see the criteria through which I'm trying to pick the books from. None of these books are going to be specifically addressing the college condition. They're going to be mainstream books, not specific to college, that I think are particularly good for college for a variety of reasons. So, for example, a book on admissions and writing applications might be specifically better for applying to college, for example, but I didn't include that in for a variety of reasons. One is that I want these books to be entertaining, and two, I want to recommend books a little bit more broadly. So, first up, let's take a look at the values. So these are going to be the things we're looking for in these books. Stuff that helps encourage intellectual habits or virtues. A lot of what college really is you're trying to, sharpen yourself intellectually in addition to just getting a diploma, such that you have stronger critical thinking skills. And it requires, depending on your degree, a great amount of critical thinking to do well in college. So another thing is a lot of time you're doing stuff on your own, more so. So you have to be more self-starting and more directed in college than you do in, let's say, high school. A lot of classes are going to be like test only. And a lot of classes aren't going to hold your hand through projects or anything like that. Another criteria is thinking about the future. A lot of the times people, they path into college and then they don't really know what they want to do from there. Another is thinking about the major. I think there is a narrative where you have to really try and specialize, commit, and really go at it. I don't think that the narrative is correct. One of the books we're going to be talking about specifically is going to be addressing that. And I think you can look at it as more you're pursuing intellectual virtue necessarily than trying to get in and out and get your degree is a better way of looking at college. And then we're going to also look at college culture and the phenomena of saftyism. We'll come back to that. And then fifth, I want all the books to be efficient, so I picked books that I thought would be easy to read quickly, generally speaking, because when you're in college, you have a lot of assignments, or when you're getting ready to go to college. Maybe you could read this in the summer before college, but I wanted them to be fairly accessible and easy, quick reads. And so I wanted them to be information dense, and then I also want them to be entertaining to some degree because that seems like a good look. So we'll get into the books. I'm just going to go from the top. We have The Rocket Years by Elizabeth Segran. So this book reads a little bit more like a conversation than the other books, and she talks about, getting your life in your order, and really talks about being in your 20s, but I think thinking about it a little bit earlier is nice. And so this is going with the second value, thinking about your future. She talks about how your hobbies, your relationships, and your physical activity, your diet, lifestyle, all that stuff kind of solidifies in your 20s. And so what her primary thesis is that you should be intentional with the way you're setting your life up in your 20s because it's going to carry you through the rest of your life. And I think that this is sensible to start thinking about early. The book reads very conversational. It's very approachable. I like the book a lot. And so I think that that's a fairly good book for that sort of thing. And let's go into the next one, Solving the Procrastination Puzzle. So I think one thing a lot of college students struggle with is procrastinating. There's a lot of assignments that are easily done, but almost every college student I talk to at college puts assignments off to the last minute, and they're so much harder than they have to be. If you are a little more self-starting, then it would become a lot easier. Solving the Procrastination Puzzle is one of my favorite books of all time. It's very short. I think it's like 100 pages, something to that effect. 105. There's some like little comics in there. And in some sense, if you can deal with the procrastination problem, it makes all of college a lot easier. If you don't procrastinate, then you don't have to stay up late. Staying up late interferes with your sleep, which interferes with your emotional well-being. And if you can establish good being proactive types of habits, those will be really useful. I really wish I had read this book earlier, and it's very easy to read. So that's a strong book, I think. Moving more into the intellectual virtues, I really like the 5 elements of effective thinking. I think this book is really underrated. I recently did a review on it. What the author does is they create a sort of model of thinking about 4 particular intellectual virtues and then tie it to an element. So making mistakes is fire, mastering the basics is earth, following the flow of ideas is water, and asking questions is air. And then the 5th element is you have to be willing to change. The book is written by, I think it's 2 mathematics professors at university. So a lot of the examples are particularly relevant to when you're the academic setting, which I think is appropriate for recommending books for college. And also, I think that one of kind of the traps of college campus culture, or this was my experience in terms of how students view stuff intellectually, which is largely what I mean by college culture. For number 4, one of the problems is just caring about the grade and not about the pursuit of knowledge or the pursuit of understanding. And I think that this book really tackles that in an aggressive way, in that you're trying to get at better understanding more so than grades. I know when I was in college, one of the most annoying questions that students would ask, and they asked it all the time, is this going to be on the test? Not, is this important to understand, or something to that effect. It's always, is it going to be on the test? Which, okay, fair. Students are trying not to fail. But going back to the procrastination thing, if you're proactive and you're pursuing the knowledge, you don't really have to stress about failing your classes, I don't think. But if you put stuff off to the last minute, it's certainly, you have a lot more cause for stressing. And so if you can proactively front load stuff, you won't have to deal with stress as much. The next book is The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. This book, actually, I think it's this book and the next book were really kind of the impetus for starting the list, but then I wanted to make it 5. So in this book, I won't go over all the details, but they really challenge kind of the protectionist culture that is kind of entrenched itself in universities, where there is this notion that being exposed to certain ideas itself causes harm, and as a consequence, students should be protected from those ideas. And I think that if there's an environment for exploring ideas and being exposed to ideas that are perhaps dangerous, it's university, right? Being able to critically evaluate ideas and being able to sit in the room with ideas you disagree with profoundly without suffering like a catastrophic emotional breakdown, I think is an important thing. And if you look at like the psychological literature, like PTSD, like slowly reintroducing the stressor is a common treatment for PTSD. I don't want to go into the book entirely, but I think it's one that's definitely well worth looking into. And then the final book mainly has to do with selecting a major and specialization, and that's range. And so there's this 10,000 hour rule narrative that's common in a lot of books and a lot of just talking about stuff where after 10,000 hours you become an expert in something. And so what you should do is you should specialize and specialize early. And what this book Range does is it takes a closer look at this. And what the data seems to suggest is that, man, specializing is really good for some things. When the feedback of the environment is really good, like such as in chess and in golf, which are two examples that are commonly used for like the 10,000 hour rule type of thing, where they're like specialize. And they commonly talk about the Polgar sisters who just crushed it in chess, just completely dominant, and their father Laszlo raised them young just to crush at chess, and they did. And then Tiger Woods for golf, because he learned how to putt before he could walk. The narrative is that you just specialize, but the feedback for stuff like golf and chess is very straightforward. When the feedback starts to get more complicated, like when you're trying to invent stuff or you're trying to problem solve and the puzzle pieces aren't necessarily that straightforward, like in chess, the pieces are like they only move one way, and a lot of it's just pattern recognition. I think some examples the book uses is like jazz, which is much more creative. So for creative tasks, it's actually useful to have range or a more generalist approach where you have a lot of different knowledge from different areas and you synthesize it together in order to kind of get this new thing. And creative labor is going to be extremely important with automation. And so what the author argues is that knowing a lot of different things is important. I personally find this something that I really wish I knew back when I was attending university, because everyone's like, oh, you got to pick a field. You have to really specialize, etc., etc. And what this book suggests is it's more important to find what you want to do than it is to specialize immediately, because even in the process of finding, you're going to pick up useful information. So let's say I'm majoring in economics, and then I decide I don't really like economics, and I switch to journalism, right? I will be able to write about economics or economic things in journalism much better as a result of my economic knowledge, right? And so it's not necessarily a bad thing to switch, but being stuck in a job you hate or a field you hate is a pretty bad thing, and so it's something to be avoided. So that's what I think the book Range can provide. Now, I think I've done reviews for all of these books on YouTube, so I'll try and post the links, with the exception of the first one, which was The Rocket Years. So what I will do is I'll quickly go back through the books. So we have The Rocket Years. I think that this one is good for thinking about your future in terms of values go. We have The Coddling of the American Mind. I think this is good for the college culture safetyism as well as intellectual habits, because they place emphasis on, seeking the truth over necessarily being comfortable. We have The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking, which I think is good for intellectual habits and virtues, as well as college culture or intellectual culture, because what you should be thinking about is mastering material, not necessarily just getting good grades. And I think that attitude will help in the long run. And then we have Solving the Procrastination Puzzle. If you were going to read all 5, I would start with this book because it's very easy to read, very short, and it is about primarily intellectual habits, virtues. And then we have Range, which I think is useful for just thinking about the selection process of picking a major and knowing that it's more about, I think, doing intellectual work than necessarily making progress. Honorable mention goes out to Atomic Habits. I think that's a very accessible book, and you're talking about building habits. I think building habits is important during that period of your life. So that book's also a pretty good look. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, or you have ideas for certain lists that you'd like to see, leave a comment below about what types of book stacks you would like to see for specific things. And also, if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, and have a good one.